People are streaming in, which I love to see. Welcome, everybody, to a very special session of JWA's Quarantine-ish Book Talks. I'm Judith Rosenbaum. I'm so glad to be back with you this evening. Whether you have been with us since March 2020 or whether this is your very first JWA program, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you're here. Please introduce yourself in the chat box. We love to know who's with us and where you're from. And make sure to chat to panelists and attendees. And also drop any questions that you have into the chat box throughout our conversation, and I will make sure to bring it in. We are delighted to have the wonderful and inimitable Tovah Feldshuh with us tonight to talk about her work and her new memoir, Lilyville, Mother, Daughter, and Other Roles I've Played. She has brought to life so many Jewish women's stories on the stage and screen. And here she turns the spotlight on her own family in a book that is just delightfully funny and thoughtful and full of love. And since JWA is dedicated to recognizing and celebrating all Jewish women as history makers, this book feels like a match made in heaven. Before I introduce Tovah and we begin our conversation, I want to say a few words about JWA for those who may not know the fullness of our work. We are a digital archive that helps expand the Jewish narrative by documenting and sharing Jewish women's stories. We love to use the history as a framework for understanding the issues that are important today and to lead us into the future. The Quarantine-ish Book Talks are just one aspect of JWA's work, and I hope you will check out jwa.org to explore the full range of projects and resources that we offer. So I am truly honored to be here tonight with Tovah Feldshuh, who really needs no introduction, but here are a few highlights. She is a 6-time Emmy and Tony nominee who's also been awarded 3 honorary doctorates. Additionally, for her theater work, she's won 4 Drama Desks, 4 Outer Critics Circle Awards, 3 Dramalogues, the Obie, the Theater World, and the Helen Hayes and Lucille Lortel Awards for Best Actress. In other words, she's a star. I can't think of anyone else who could play both Golda Meir and also sing Where's the Bathroom to Rachel Bloom on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Welcome, Tovah. We are so delighted to have you here with us tonight.
Judith, I'm delighted to be with you, and I hope I'm coming across loud and clear. I'm actually in my dressing room.
Yes, perfect. Well, that's great. So tell us, Lilyville, what is Lilyville?
Let me tell you about Lilyville. My beloved Lilyville, which was just chosen by Amazon editors as the #1 relationship memoir. My mother, Lily, and there she is. This is the date of my bat mitzvah. That's December the 8th in an unknown decade. And I will discuss clothing with you later in the chat. Let me tell you about Lilyville. My mother, Lily, was born on a dining room table in the Bronx in 1911 at 1354 Charlotte Street, and she lived to be 103 robust years young. And when I told her that I wanted to be an actress, she said, "Why don't you just go into the kitchen, get my challah knife, stick it in my heart, and twist it?" When she came to Broadway to see me in the musical Pippin and saw me stop the show singing Upside Down while simultaneously performing a full-out aerial act 30 feet in the air, she said, "Tovah, that you should still have to earn a living like this, and on a trapeze yet." When I took her to see me as Prime Minister Golda Meir in what would become the longest-running one-woman show in the history of Broadway, Mommy said, "Tovah, I rate your parts by how you look. Dolly Levi was a 10. Golda Meir, 0. Welcome to Lilyville, where my mother Lily reigns supreme. And though all my parts happened on Broadway and in film, in television, in concert halls, they all took place in Lilyville, for better or for exasperation. How do a Jewish mother who believes you cannot have it all and a daughter who lives like you can get along? They don't. My mother, she was born before women's suffrage. I was born in the lap of women's liberation. There was a 2-generation chasm between us. And Lilyville is about the bumpy uphill journey of my mother and me to figure us out. And in doing so, this memoir reflects the ever-changing expectations of women, and of course, Jewish women in America, for over 110 years. I couldn't possibly envision my memoir in any other format than the one I know best, as a theater piece. And the book is constructed in 3 acts with 2 intermissions. So come on into the theater of my memories, either through the hardcover or through the audiobook. I'm Jewish. Well, we're all Jewish. We're all about schmoozing. Well, schmoozing and suffering. Schmoozing and suffering and guilt. I hope you buy this book.
Thank you so much, Tovah. Well, one of the things I appreciated is not having been able to be in the theater for more than a year. I just sat with your book, and it was just like such a drink of water to feel like, okay, you get to be in this performative space, even from the comfort of my own couch. So thank you for evoking that for us and for welcoming us into the drama of your life in that way.
It's my pleasure. It was my pleasure. The book exploded for me when I realized I should write about what I know best, which is theater. And instead of having chapters, I give you scenes and with, as I said, 3 acts, 2 intermissions. Instead of having a forward, you get an overture. Instead of an after. Everyone who contributed. So I found it a very exciting, very heartrending, very interesting excavation of my life as was viewed by my mother, and my mother's life as viewed through my eyes, and the constant quest of any author, which is to get down into the river of common human experience so that you can hit the universal. Can you all hear me? Sometimes did you get all that?
We got that.
Good.
So did you know from the start when you embarked on the project of writing a memoir that you were going to go do it through the lens of this mother-daughter relationship?
I did not. I was asked, there was a wonderful literary agent named Albert Lee. He listened to an interview I gave on Entertainment Weekly to Dalton Ross and Dalton's partner, Jessica. He got to his office at UTA. He called my managers in Hollywood and he said, does Tovah Feldshuh have a literary agent? They said no. And he said, I think she has a writer's voice. And then he came to my living room and we discussed what to write about. And I wanted to write a television series about my mother called Lilyville. And I still want to write a television series about my mother called Lilyville. And he said, no. I'm a literary agent and we want you to write a book. So I said, instead of just writing a celebrity autobiography, first of all, I'm a lovely person and I do act for a living, but I'm not an international celebrity. I'm one of your local kids. I'm a Broadway actress. I'm local talent to the city of my birth. And I've done movies and television and hope actually to make Lilyville a series. And it's looking pretty good. Hollywood, I have to say, is interested. So
that's great to hear.
So, in all events, he said, what do you want to write about? Since I'm writing a TV series is not what we're interested in. We need a book. I'm a book agent. And I said, well, why don't I write about my life through mother's eyes and my mother's life through my eyes? And she lived to over 103 and she died a magnificent death. And she actually lived a magnificent life. The only thing is that she bloomed in the last quarter of her life, in the last 20 years of her life. She bloomed like the lily she was after my father's death.
So we'll get to that, but I want to start out with something that you referenced in your opening, which is that you and your mother sort of represented the ways that feminism created a generational divide. Can you tell us a little bit about how that manifested?
My mother's fate was sewn up in the match she made, which is something that existed throughout time. And therefore, when she and my father fell in love at 16 and 17 years old, really, or maybe almost 17 and 18, they were both in rapid advance because in those years, America needed a workforce. And if you were clever, you were pushed ahead in school. So both of them entered NYU at 16. And my father was a sophomore. My mother was a freshman when they met. And he eventually would get a scholarship to Harvard Law School and would become her husband. And they had a great love affair for 68 years, and they were married for 63 of those years when finally my mother was a virgin, as was common in those days. And, she would not sleep with my father until she had a ring. So after 5 years of dating, they had to go one way or another. She was either going to break it off or they were going to marry. So they eloped and they lived secretly together for 2 years before they announced their engagement and got married a second time publicly on the rooftop of the San Moritz on June the 14th, 1935. But in fact, they'd been sleeping together since January 28th, 1933, while he was still at Harvard, and they didn't have a pot to pee and they had no money, but they were lovers, and you got married. They actually went to my grandmother, who was British, and told her this news. And I remember my mother would tell me that Grandma Ada said, just forget about it. Just forget about it. And my mother said, no, I'm going to go with Sidney to the New Yorker hotel. I am his wife. And in Lilyville, I have the receipt from the New Yorker hotel and their first night together as man and wife. But the point being, in terms of women's liberation, my mother was born before women's suffrage, before World War I, lived through the Spanish flu, lived through the roaring 20s. When she was a teenager, she entered NYU in 1927, lived through the stock market crash, the Great Depression, and World War II before she was 30. I, on the other hand, was born in the second lap of women's liberation. And I had a father who said, never beg a man for a hat. And never beg a man for a hat meant a woman must have her own money, and I have my own money. And in the 45 years that I'm married to Andrew Harris Levy, whom I love, who was also a Harvard lawyer, like my father, I have not asked for one stitch of clothing, and that is complete training from my father. My mother, on the other hand, her identity was defined by the match she made, and she made a great one. She left the lower middle class of the Bronx to enter the upper middle class of Scarsdale, New York, complete with a 5-gated gelding horse that was the state champion, and my father becoming the president of a restricted riding club that fortunately went into the red and needed their Jewish lawyer. And they got Tovah Feldshuh with his great mount with Wildwood King. And he put that fabulous club, Boulderbrook, in the black, and we became fervent members. And I was in this wild thing of going to Hebrew school and being part of the horsey set of Scarsdale, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was all the jodhpurs and the hats and the outfits and watching Daddy at shows. And it was a lot of fun, but my empowerment actually came through Sidney, and it's because Sidney knew death. Sidney understood death. His father died when he was 16, suddenly in 4 days. It crashed his program or his plans to go to any of the Ivy Leagues. He went to the local school, which was NYU, and then he knew death because he was in the intelligence in the war and would be drafted in the Army when my mother was pregnant with my brother and would not return till 1946. Mm-hmm. And he never left my side, and I was very, very lucky. But the book is not called Sydneyville because there isn't enough conflict. The book is called Lilyville because my mother was also, in subsuming herself to my dad, she also kept quiet. She gave him the spotlight. He was even called Sonny by his mother, Marion. So she gave Sonny the sun, and she would feel the spotlight right here next to her arm, but she gave it to Sidney. She gave it to Sidney. And she never had to beg Sidney for a hat. He was very, very generous. I even remember him giving her his earnings to administer the money, the finances of the house. He had complete trust in my mother. And also he was a very bright lawyer. He put everything under mommy's name because she earned no money. So it was protected. Right. So the house was in her name, but it was a different go. My husband and I have 2 incomes, and we have worked cumulatively of over 88 years together. So we're very comfortable because I've worked all my life and I'm still working. I'm about to play Dr. Ruth Westheimer live here at Basley Theatre here in Sag Harbor. I was just filmed as Dr. Ruth in the West Coast, and now I'm going to do the program live. They're opening the theater for the first time in 15 months, 84 patrons a night in a 300-seat theater. Everybody socially distanced, and that is what I'm doing this month.
Well, that sounds good. Can't wait to see that or have a chance to hear more about that. You write in the book about how you actually had sort of several different relationships with your mother over time. One of the gifts of her long, long life is that you went through phases with her, which, as a child, when she was, as you said, sort of withholding in some ways, and more alignment when you were married and a mother, and then this real closeness after your father died. And so how did you come to understand her differently as you got to experience her in those different phases?
Well, I think not that I was lucky, that we're all lucky. All of us who have the privilege of giving birth, and this is not to cast any aspersions on women who've decided to remain single and not have children. But if you've given birth, and unless you're insane and have a terrible relationship with your mother, your body starts to understand your mother. And I think our mother, I checked with my brother, my older brother, David, I think she loved us very much, but she was a mitzvah machine. She showed her love through deeds. And I'm not even going to say deeds of loving kindness, deeds of dutifulness. That's how it came across. But she didn't use verbal communication of, I love you. And as you got older, as one ages, you realize how to forgive your mother, that this didn't come from nowhere. This is the way she was brought up. She was brought up under that Eastern European superstition that you do not praise your child, lest the child have hubris and the gods will strike her or him down. Or in this case, Hashem will think she's have overweening pride. So we tie red ribbons around the crib, and we tie red ribbons around the stroller, and we do this ritual stuff it's really mishug, but it connects us to legacy. It connects us to our legacy. I always tell our son, who has a beautiful baby girl named Sydney, after my father, and our daughter has a beautiful baby girl named Camille Willa, but her Hebrew name is Lila, and that was my mother's Hebrew name. I always tell Brandon to sing Sydney to sleep with the Shema. And it has to do with, my father loved being a Jew. And so I love my father, so I love being Jewish. It's the same thing here. Brandon, because of COVID, has so much contact with his newborn baby. And I said, make sure, his wife is magnificent. She is converted to Judaism. We're very lucky to have her. But I said, sing that baby the Shema, because she will love her daddy. And if her daddy loves being Jewish, so she will come to love the religion that she'll be brought up with. Anyway,
You also talk about Judaism as the place where you first encountered gender inequality and were sort of determined to leave that behind. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, it was a double message, because I was the only bat mitzvah at Quaker Ridge School, and I was the only serious pianist in my grade. So I stood alone a lot in my early youth. And I now realize I was able to stand alone because I was trained to do so by my mommy. The silence of that large house in Scarsdale echoed the silence of Lily. And the three words I needed to hear, which is, I love you. I love you no matter what. I love you because you breathe. And you can bet your bottom dollar, I say that to Amanda and Brandon every day. And now they're in their 30s. I still say it. I still say I'm the luckiest mother in the world because I have the most empathic children. I used to say that to them at 2, because I wanted to put in them what I hoped for them. Put in them what you hope for them. And what was the question exactly?
Encountering gender inequality in Judaism as
right.
well.
So to make a long story short, I was the only bat mitzvah at Quaker Ridge. So while the kids were having a 13th birthday party with potato chips, pretzel, and Pepsi or Coca-Cola, I was having a major production, even though it was Friday evening and you could not touch the Torah. It was only the Haftorah. We did one blessing over the candles. The fathers did the blessing over the wine and the bread. The rabbi, the Shechianu. Yes, they blessed us. I had a double bat mitzvah with another girl named Carden, lovely girl named, her last name was Carden. And we then had a party afterwards, after the bat mitzvah on Friday night, in the basement of my house, just like my brother David had a party after his Saturday afternoon bar mitzvah at Hampshire Country Club with the Lester Lannan Orchestra. And I had a high school band of 4 musicians. So I felt fortunate to have such an extravagant party compared to my peers. But as I grew older, it was clearly that we were sidelined and put to the left or right, which doesn't exist. At least it doesn't exist at B'nai Jeshurun, I can tell you that. There's a lot more gender equality in all the movements of Judaism, except for the ultra-Orthodox. And, God bless them, Godspeed, sei gesund, and it's not my club. It's not what I believe in. I have a fabulous cousin, Dale Gottlieb, ultra-reform, until he met the Bostoner Rebbe. He's now Rabbi David Gottlieb. He's one of the heads of Or Sameach in Jerusalem. And he does not touch me, God bless him. He when we're with Andy and I were with him, he used to focus on me. He focuses completely on Andrew, and not for me though. As a proponent of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and somebody who had the honor of playing the Supreme Court justice, I respect the way they want to conduct their lives, and I give them space to do what they need to do. It's just nothing that I agree in. I also feel that fundamentalist religions of any kind tend to corner women, shunt them away, whether it's a shadur or putting us up in Orthodox temples where the mechitza is made of concrete. Where I was at one where there's a slit in the wall, as if you're wearing a shadur, where you can look down upon the men. I'm playing Ruth Westheimer now, and she lost her parents when she was 10. She became an orphan in the Holocaust. However, she said, I went to synagogue holding my father's hand, and I sat with all the men. I sat with all the men because she was 10 years old. And they lived to love God, and to love God, you had to love learning. So somehow she was empowered by her father early enough in her life to become Dr. Ruth.
Right.
Go from being an orphan to become Dr. Ruth.
There are many stories like that.
I wonder what it's like for women with empowering mothers. I didn't have an empowering mother. And I feel that I'm very, very successful in my business. And I hope that I am empowering to my children, because I can't imagine what it must be like if you have two parents that are rooting for you and telling you to reach for the stars so you can land on the roof. Reach for the roof, you never get off the ground.
Well, I had an empowering mother, and I can tell you it was still complicated. So
Yeah.
I didn't know until I read your book that your given name was not actually Tovah, but Terry Sue. Tell me a little bit about how you chose Tovah and what impact to live into that new name.
It was huge impact. It changed the whole landscape of my life. I was born Terry Sue Feldshuh at Beth David Hospital on 90th and Lexington on the east side of New York. My parents had moved from Park Avenue to the Bronx. So because after the war, during the war, my mother could not sustain the apartment at Park Avenue. My father was a GI, and she moved back with her parents to 955 Walton. So my first years were in the combustive building of 955 Walton with my aunt and uncle Harold and May Silberman, my cousins Johnny and Peter, my older brother David, my father and mother Lily and Sydney, and my grandparents Ada and Gershon. It was fabulous. And I was called Terry Sue because we were American. And my father used to sing, Terry Sue, doodaloo doo doo. I love you, doodaloo doo doo. Yes, I do. I mean, I remember that song. And I fell in love at Sarah Lawrence with a boy from Wesleyan. I was at Sarah Lawrence College. He was up in Wesleyan. We did the Crucible up there, and he was the photographer of the production. And he asked me what other names I was called besides Terry Sue. He said it was such a peculiar moniker for me. Sorry, I'm at the theater they're putting in the set. Peculiar moniker for me. And I said, I was called Tovah in Sunday school. I didn't even say Hebrew school because my boyfriend was Christian and I was shy to say Hebrew school. I was born into a time where it wasn't fashionable to be too Jewish. It wasn't fashionable, whatever it is. Betty Persky became Lauren Bacall. People changed their names all the time to be more anglicized. And I went in the opposite direction. Anyway, Michael Fairchild, bless his heart, whose heritage came across from England to the United States in the 1600s, and whose grandfather went to Yale in a horse and carriage as my grandfather came across the waters from England in steerage. It's a very different background. He was the one who said, when I said my name was Tovah at Sunday school, he went, Tovah, now that's a name. And I took the name that summer at Matunic, Rhode Island, Theater by the Sea. I was Terry Fairchild. And then after that, I was Tovah Feldshuh. And my last legal document as Terry Sue Feldshuh was my BA from Sarah Lawrence College, because I felt I owed it to my parents. When I went to Minneapolis as a McKnight Fellow in acting, I called myself Tovah Feldshuh. And little did I know that Tovah was a Danish name. It's very common to be called Tovah in Minnesota because they're all Scandinavian. So they thought there was a local girl, So that was fun. But then when I got to New York, with the name Tovah Feldshuh, the state of Israel fell on my head, and my perceived value was very clear. She had to be foreign, maybe Israeli or Eastern European, and religious, and a maven an expert in Judaism, and I was neither. I was brought up in the conservative movement. I wasn't an idiot. I knew tefillah, but which is prayer book Hebrew, which means you can pray. Like when I'm in Denmark shooting a film, I can't read the Yom Kippur Siddur in Danish, but I can read it in Hebrew. In all events, Shakespeare says, "What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." Well, there's a lot in a name, because nobody's life is about yours. Their life is about themselves. We're all contained in our bodies. So as much as Judith likes me and I like Judith, she has to figure out what she's going to have for dinner after the show. And I got to figure out what I'm going to have for dinner and who's going to go to sleep and what vitamins we want to take, what children we want to hug, how we want to take care of ourselves. So therefore, in a name, it is shorthand to figure out who people are, whether it was Dustin Hoffman, Bobby De Niro, or a Tovah Feldshuh. Nobody was Hebraicizing their name in the 70s, but I did, and as a result, I was gifted with my first role, which was as Lucy Dreyfus in the play by Jean-Claude Comfort called Dreyfus in Rehearsal. Mr. Merrick said, "I believe in this actress." David Merrick said to Garson Kanin, who was directing, "I believe in this actress named Tovah Feldshuh. Maybe she'd be right for the part of Miriam Poladnik, the Polish actress who will play Lucy Dreyfus in this play called Dreyfus in Rehearsal." And Garson Kanin said, "She doesn't even have to audition. With a name like Tovah Feldshuh and Tovah Feldshuh, Miriam Poladnik, with a name like that, she's got to be right." And they just gave me the role. So it was wild. Yentl also was an audition, but I was able to win it. Holocaust was an offer. Judy Stein was an offer. Lillian Kantrowitz in Walk on the Moon was an offer. Golda Meir was an offer. Ruth Bader Ginsburg an offer. Ruth Westheimer an offer. And I've played many roles, from Shakespeare to Katharine Hepburn, and I've played many people who are not Jewish at all. But those large Jewish heroines have been the most acknowledged roles of my career because of all of you, because of what we feel about the international and the national Jewish community and what it means to depict the heroic Jewish woman in all her colors, from Judy Stein and Kissing Jessica Stein to Naomi Bunch, who was really wild in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
So I've been thinking about all your powerful Jewish mother characters, and I love so many of them. I love your character in Kissing Jessica Stein. I love your character in A Walk on the Moon. I think that's a brilliant movie, and I wish it got more attention. I feel like it should be a classic. And of course, Golda Meir, but of course, Naomi Bunch, right? And actually, Rebecca asked us a question about this, about the development of the mother character of Naomi Bunch, and did you channel any aspects of your own mother in that? Was she different? How did you approach that character of Naomi Bunch?
Well, the thing that Lily and Naomi Bunch have in common is, let me fix you so you can survive. You need to be fixed. So this has to be adjusted, and that has to be adjusted. And I really need you to follow my path so that I can preserve and protect my young, because preserving and law firm, having gone to Yale and Harvard on my dime, after all, the mother.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
Leaving a New York law firm and going to Podunk, California, to follow an unemployed skate driver who wasn't her ethnic background or her religious background, Josh Chan. It was like a nightmare for this mother. So she flew out to check on how her daughter was. And even in checking out how her daughter was, had her own narcissism, because she walks in, I guess, and having had maybe a forceps delivery, says, "Where's the bathroom? Where's the bathroom? I need to find your bathroom. Tell me that you have a bathroom in this hovel you call home. In this hovel you call home." So even that. So all of a sudden we're deprecating, and she's saying, "This is how you should decorate it. And by the way, you're looking healthy." And by healthy, I mean chunky. I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just stating it as fact. I see your eczema is back. So fix her, make her better, and therefore she may survive. So that was what was common between Lily and Naomi Bunch, but Lily was not as brutal as Naomi Bunch. Naomi Bunch is in a farce, in a true comedy. And but the fixing part. And I have to say, even with my children in their 30s, there are certain things I disagree with, and I have to bite my tongue. I really have to bite my tongue. I don't want to disempower them. On the other hand, some of the decisions are just cockeyed, but
But not yours to make.
sometimes I speak up gently and sometimes I don't. Very often using the question like looking for babysitters and having last minute Louis with the babysitters. You just say, what do you think about making plans a little bit earlier so that we could be sure to make sure that you're covered and can be with us? Would that work for you? How can I help? Things like that. They have to be really cushioned so people don't feel disempowered.
Yes, you are a very wise woman, wise mother in that respect. What have been some of your favorite mother characters that you've played? And are there particular that you learned from those parts?
I think, I love any role that's challenging and rich and deep. I love. They're like different children. However, to imbibe the virtues of Golda Meir, followed by Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, followed by Ruth Westheimer. She's considered more of a comic character because of her focus on sex therapy. But in fact, her, at the moment I'm playing her, so she's one of my favorites. It is like a child. She is my primary focus, other than my own actual family or being with you, Judith, but she's my primary focus about 9 or 10 hours a day. And she went from being ripped away from her family at 10, in an orphanage for 6 years when she expected to be there for maybe 4 or 5 months, given a certificate as a domestic. That's what she was given, that she could have been a domestic in Swiss homes at the end of the war. That is what Wartheim, the home where she was sent to, gave her, and deciding instead, to go to Israel, where she had the choice to fight for the independence of the Jewish state. And she did. She joined the Haganah and she was a trained sniper. And to this day, she's a pretty damn good shot. So to go from there to finding a boy in Israel who wanted to be a doctor, so they had to go to Paris to study. She was accepted at the Sorbonne. She became the director of a kindergarten. Ultimately, that marriage did not work, so she kept going. She never got her high school diploma. She never got her baccalaureate, and she got her master's and her doctorate because she convinced the new school to allow her into the master's program by showing her transcript from the Sorbonne. So the women I have played, whether it's Golda, from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you have to do your research. I went to Milwaukee to research Golda, reminds you a little bit of a prehistoric animal, a little bit like an anteater, close, observer, learner. And I was in Milwaukee going into the archives of Golda's of Israel. I said, no ISIS to get out of Milwaukee. I love them all. I feel privileged. And one thing I learned as I grew older, even though I played Isabel in Measure for Measure, Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, once I realized and owned the fact that I had my acting chops through constant study and through taking up the challenge of these classical roles, then I began to ride the horse in the direction it was galloping. I mean, if you were offered Lillian Kantrowitz and Judy Stein and Naomi Bunch, and you would take that too, along with Deanna Monroe on The Walking Dead. Nobody deals with that show because they think it's just about zombies. It's one of the best acted shows I've ever been on. And as Ruth Gordon told me, she was a matron of honor at our wedding. She said, Tovah, darling, you think it's hard to get up there? Try to stay up there. So once you're on the marquee, this was the #1 show in the world on cable by the end of season 2 for The Walking Dead. And they stayed up there for 8 seasons. You know what that takes?
Are coming back.
Yeah. And we're astonishing. I'm sorry that I was bitten. Everybody goes on The Walking Dead to die. And that was a Christian girl, Deanna Monroe. President Mackenzie on Salvation, a wonderful series that only lasted 2 seasons. There are plenty of people I played that don't happen to come from our particular background, but it takes courageous casting people. They have to get away from the sound Tovah Feldshuh. Also, I am bringing this up now. I'm sure we are all concerned with the outrageous, rampant, expressed anti-Semitism. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly what we should do, but I know we have to stand strong.
Well, we have a question actually. We have some great questions in the chat, which I'm going to turn to. But Yafa, who lives in Australia, asked a question about that and said, living in Australia and hearing about the anti Semitism that's happening in the US, are you not, cautious and afraid to be so publicly Jewish?
All this was planned before that motorcade, that despicable, grotesque motorcade on Finchley Road in London, where, let me be clear, it is not in our agenda, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, and if I am, please correct me. It is not in the Jewish agenda to annihilate the Palestinians. That is not what we are, what we do. That's not our agenda. We do not, Jews would rather go to the beach and read a book, long form. They would rather study than take up an AK-47. And our children would rather be at university than have to don army clothes and go out for the fight for the life of Israel. That is not our agenda. The agenda of Hamas is to annihilate the Jewish state, to push us into the sea. It's exactly what it was as it was for under Golda Meir. That's a problem. They're ready to commit genocide. I have no question about it. No question about it. And it makes me increasingly sad that Black Lives Matter think they are related to that agenda by relating to the Palestinians at large. The Palestinians are human beings. They're human beings like we are. But Hamas is the political military arm expressing itself, and it is expressing itself very clearly. Jihad. So am I frightened? I am not moment to moment frightened in the sense I've not experienced anything here, but I am certainly not walking around, nor have I ever, with the Mogen David around my neck. My cousins in London, my grandmother was British. I have a big British family. In the neighborhood of my beloved cousin Katie, the mezuzahs have been ripped off some of the doors, and people are getting beat up in skull caps. So it would be naive of us not to think that this is not unlike Germany in the 30s, because it is. It is. And we have to, I'm not sure how to handle it. We need some very strong leaders to come out against it, as Boris Johnson did. And I hope Joe Biden is running a balanced ship here. He's a fabulous president and a decent man. They call him Mensch. That's his nickname, Mensch. But Israel alone has not done as well under more liberal governments from the United States. It's so ironic. It's so ironic. So I pray for us, and I guess I would be wisely careful.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit to a different question from Susan, who says that you seem so full of confidence and success. Have you ever had self-doubt, and how do you cope with it?
Read Lilyville, read the chapters on the Guthrie Theater, and you will find out what it was like to cope with no approbation professionally for 2 years. How did I survive? I survived by not leaving the field of play, but I did not have confidence. I was lucky I had a brother. I have a genius brother. He's 26 years old. He was associate artistic director of the Guthrie. We were the first brother-sister team. I won the same huge scholarship that he won 5 years earlier. And my brother continued to believe in me. So I had one person. And then people like the dressers and the crew and my fellow actors, they liked me. But there were two directors that were absolutely brutal to me in public and didn't believe in me. And you know what I mean? I may not have had any talent. I don't know. I may not have had what I needed. I figured I'd be a chorus girl. By the time they finished with me, I figured I'd be a chorus girl for the rest of my life. So I had 14 lines in a red dress opposite Chris Plummer in the musical of Cyrano. And it went from the Guthrie to the Royal Alex in Toronto to the Colonial in Boston and opened at the Palace Theater. I came to New York on Broadway. The Palace Theater, one of the greatest vaudeville houses and one of the most historic Broadway houses of New York City. And from 14 lines in a red dress, 18 months later, I was on the marquee as Yentl. So those guys can kiss my Jewish ass.
You mentioned your brother, and Joan actually asked us a question, said that your brother, who's both a physician and a playwright, have you ever worked together on any theater projects?
Yes, we did The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie together. Also, most importantly, at the Guthrie, he cast me. He had to go up against opposition to do so. He cast me off main stage in Fables Here and Then, where all the scholarship students were cast, and we went on a beautiful tour, and I had as big a part as everybody else, even Stephen. But I remember I played a tap dancing caterpillar, a tubercular chicken. It was part of story theater. So those were wonderful parts. And even though I had almost no roles at the Guthrie and I was understudying all the size 7 leading ladies, in those days, you didn't have your own costume. You understudied the people who were your same size. In case they got sick, you'd step into their dress. And I never went on for any of my leading ladies, but I was cast in that. And then David cast me on main stage in an Italian straw hat by Boucicault. And I remember Michael Langham said, "You're not going to cast her, are you? I mean, we'd want this actress." And my brother stood firm. He said, "I want to give her one chance, just one chance." So it was a small role, but it was a nice role as the bride. So it was opposite the lead. And I think my brother, I won't say artistically, but psychologically saved my life out in Minnesota. I mean, I would have never taken my life. We're Jewish. You don't take your life. Your life is precious. And had I been awarded roles at the Guthrie, I probably never would have left on time to garner the tremendous support I had in my hometown. Because whatever they thought didn't work, sure worked in New York. And I work like a dog. When I got my raise in Yentl, when I was leaving Yentl, Mr. Richard Rogers took a shine to me and he cast me in things without audition. And I was to play Anne Boleyn in the first act and Princess Elizabeth in the second in his new musical opposite Nicole Williamson called Rex. And I had just come to Broadway in Yentl and my Yentl contract let me out for Rex. And everybody said, "Go do Rex, you'll be typecast, Tovah Feldshuh in Yentl and Tovah Feldshuh Dreyfus in rehearsal as Miriam Polana. Get out of there. Get out of there." I turned down the understudy job of understudying Bernadette Peters in Mac and Mabel because I would never understudy again. It was so awful to do it at the Guthrie, so high stress, not enough rehearsal, and you're expected to be perfect. And I never went on. I never went on once. So I had turned down that role, and David saved my life. And to our credit, since our parents were both very hard workers, when I became successful in Yentl, I spent my salary hiring the Juilliard. When I asked to go to Juilliard, my mother said, "You're not going to a trade school." So I didn't go to a trade school. I went to Sarah Lawrence and majored in philosophy. Now that's a big money earner. That's a way not to beg a man for a hat. But I did learn to think there. So God bless it, and to work and to study for the reason of studying, not for the reason of grades. I learned to learn there. What?
Apparently to write.
Yes, I did, thanks to Grace Paley and some great professor, and Ilya Wax. Professor Ilya Wax, my Don, I said, "I can't write. I don't know how to write. I know I was in English honors at Scarsdale High, but I really don't know how to write," because you could fail at Sarah Lawrence and it wasn't so terrible. People would stand by you. And he said, "You may not know how to write, but you sure know how to talk. Please record your thoughts about Hedda Gabler, then type the recording, then bring me that recording and we will organize it." And he was the one who gave me my first applause, my first approbation to say, "You have a way of expressing yourself that is unique to you. Nobody can be you better than you." For all you writers out there, nobody can be you better than you. So anyway, I studied. I would spend my days, particularly Tuesdays and Thursdays, because there was only matinees Wednesdays, Saturdays, and actually Sundays. But I would spend Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays studying with the head of the speech department at Juilliard, the head of the Alexander technique. I still studied fencing. I went to tap dancing and ballet, and of course kept up with my singing lessons. So I put myself in my own academy as I was starring, if you will, as I had the title role in Yentl. And it all worked out very well. As my mother would say, it's so funny that she would say, "But nobody can call you Pisha, Tovah." In other words, she said, I knew my trade. So much so that I turned down Whitney Three's company. Alan Shane flew in from Warner Brothers after Yentl and took me to the Plaza, the Palm Court, and said, "We want you to do a new series. It's with John Ritter and this newcomer, Suzanne Summers, and it's called Three's Company. It'd be wonderful for you." I said, "I can't do it." He said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "I don't know how to act. It's all an accident. I'm a little tomboy because I based my whole life on the way my father lived it. It wasn't until things evolved that I became more and more aware of the marvelous traits of my mother and were able to take on some of those traits. She was so trustworthy. She was so responsible. She ran all the family parties. That's what I do. I gather our family together. We're on our 59th Shabbat together. We do a Zoom Shabbat, which I organized after the Seder last year. And my brother said, Tov, we really shouldn't stop this because COVID was everywhere, right? Death is near. What do we do when death is near? You grab the ring of life. You grab it. And really, being a Jew, we have the privilege of the fear of extinction. This is a privilege, as horrible as our history may have been, whether it's Tisha B'Av or whether it's the Holocaust. We know to make the most of every moment. We know it.
Keeps us on our toes, that's for sure. We have a question from another Susan who says, how do you feel about growing older? Do you think that the secret is to keep working hard the way that you do?
I feel lousy about growing older. I wrote an act called Aging is Optional because God, I hope it is. And I wish it were more optional. I am astonished at the caterpillar unraveling of certain, not cognitive skills, but dropping things, losing the phone, short-term memory, not loss, just short-term memory impairment. One thing I learned is that you say it as you do it. I'm putting the phone in my right pocket. I always wear Lululemons because I also have a maxim. It isn't a place for everything and everything in its place. It's one place for everything and each thing in one place. You don't change your habits. That phone goes in my right pocket. The keys to the car go in my left pocket. And my vitamins go in my left pocket, and that's what happens every day. And when I change my routine, good luck to me. So how do I feel about aging? I feel that having had to memorize 47 pages of text to play Ruth Westheimer, that I am sharpened, that the brain indeed is a fluid, spongy, wonderful, adjustable organ. It is not calcified, and that you have to use it or lose it. And that's what I feel about Pilates. That's what I feel about swimming. That's what I feel about PT. I also notice, having played Ruth Bader Ginsburg, my L5 on my right side of my bottom part, right quadrant of my back really began to kill me. And I must have been re-aggravating it. But Ruth Westheimer, she stands up straight and she's so optimistic. She even lifts up the last part of her sentences. Tovah, this, Judith, let me tell you something. So that standing up straight, I noticed my back pain went away. I can just tell you, don't give up. We don't want to die like this. We want to die like this. Yeah. And my mother lived to 103. I intend to live to 104. Does it take me longer to memorize lines? Absolutely. Do I start earlier? Yes. Keep your coping skills honed. I'm about to do 2 wonderful episodes of an anthology series, and that will be in the fall. And instead of memorizing it the day before, 2 days before, as I would when I was 30, 40, 50 years old, I used to do soap opera when I was in my 20s, but just as I was marrying Andy, I would memorize a whole text overnight. Those days are gone. They're gone. So I start earlier. And I have to say one thing, the penny does drop deeper. And we do have the advantage of wisdom. There are many things that I'm sure you've done well, that you should own your confidence in those things. You are entitled, and to keep recreating old rituals of this or old rituals of that, that's a lot from my mother. You should hear me ask for lines. I have to apologize to my line person. I do, and I do it publicly. I go, line, and there's no reason for that. I can say line. I really can. I'm excellent at my work, and it's not like I'm excellent at my work. I've worked 50 years at this stuff. I never give it up. I never give up. I spent every Wednesday with Ruth Westheimer for 4 hours a time, so she would read every line of the text so I could possibly get some of her accent, because that's the key to a character. And then you get under the character and say, why does she lift the stuff up at the end? Why does she lift the, because she's relentlessly optimistic, because the first part of her life from 10 to 20 years old was freaking traumatic. She lost control of her whole life. She lost her entire family, and she never gave up. So don't give up. It's what we've got, and enjoy the assets of wisdom, and enjoy the assets of those to whom you've given love, and hopefully they give it back to you.
I loved how at the end of the book you write about how you learned self-compassion later in life, and that is the one part of your life you wish you could read. So, what is the secret? How do we learn self-compassion?
You, I listen to Headspace, which is on an app on my phone, which teaches you how you are not your mind, how your mind is the containment of your beingness. And it's just the thought, as the plastic jar of hummus fell out of my hand this morning as I rushed to the theater to be on time, and it fell and it splattered on the kitchen floor. I have to say, in applause for little Tova or Terry Sue, I did not have one moment of a flare up. You know, those flare ups. I just looked at that and I said, this is on the floor. My prehensile abilities maybe you're not as well honed. It wasn't that at all. The lid wasn't on properly, and I thought it was. So the thing is all smushed up. I was dying to eat the stuff off the floor because I'm not supposed to waste food. Remember that from your mother? Remember the hordes. I once played, I did a concert at the University of Judaism in Los Angeles, and I said, it's so wonderful to be at the University of Judaism, and we're right next to an art gallery where I so admire the work of Mara Kurtz, who works in charcoal. She draws wolves, which means she either goes to Julian, California to study the animal, or she's with my family at the Seder table. So, I mean, we ate like a pack of wool. We ate the food dysfunction in our family was crazy. I just remember people waddling. As a matter of fact, Lillian Kantrowitz in A Walk on the Moon is based on my Aunt Nancy, may she rest in peace. And the obese people in my childhood would go to Long Beach and they'd get halfway in the Atlantic and they go like this on their arms and go, oy, what a machaya, oy, what a machaya. They couldn't even swim and they were probably still in their 50s. One should not give up the ship of the gift of life. That's all I can tell you.
One of the other pieces of wisdom that I love that you shared from your mother in the book is that happiness is a choice. And I really loved that reminder. How do you internalize that?
Well, first of all, with a 45-year marriage, I mean, we all know that marriage is one of the hardest things we'll ever do in our lives. And if you marry a person, I will say a person because it'd be a man or woman in these days. If you marry a person you love who is a fine person, whom you're lucky enough not to have corporal punishment, not to have drugs or alcoholism, and not to have betrayal, if you're lucky to have those 4 pillars in place, all you have to do when it gets bad, and it gets bad, is not leave the field of play. That's all. I have found that this stage of our marriage is absolutely the most romantic. That if you love a man and a man loves you, or if you love your partner, that the empty nest is highly underrated. Why is it underrated? Because death is no longer there. You are no longer going to live forever. You're no longer, it's here. So Andy's in his 70s, and you can bet in a king-size bed, I go over and snuggie him. Every night I want to touch him because number our days, for our days are numbered. Do not miss the rainbow. Don't miss the rainbow. And then in terms of happiness as a choice, it's the other thing my mother said. You want to know how to have a successful marriage? I'll show you how to have a successful marriage. Just shut one eye. So what happens is that as I grew older, if Andrew and I disagree, I say to myself before I open my mouth, is it worth it? Is it really worth it? That he needs to move this stuff and it's really annoying to me. Is it worth having conflict? And as I've grown older, the answer is no, it is not worth upsetting him. It is not worth upsetting him. So the marriage is really yummy, and it's as good as it was, if not better, than the first 7 years. The childbearing years, they say the marriages spike with divorce around the birth of the first child, because there's that deep, dirty secret, which is that the mother prefers the child to the mate because they're easy to love, right? Well, you have this unconditional love. Who needs a dog when you have a child? So in all events, we just kept on the course, and we had many moments of joy. I mean, in a good marriage, and I have one, the children cement the marriage. And you know what else? I think Lily and Sydney had a very good marriage. They had a passionate marriage. I used to see them kiss with their mouths open in the foyer. I remember I wanted to, and now I'm playing Ruth Westheimer, who says, "How are you? How are you? How is your clitoris? How is your vagina? How is his penis? Everything going well? Sleep well, have good sex. Bye-bye." It's just like, whoa, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. She also talks about Judaism and sex. She said, in the Jewish tradition, sex has never been shameful. It is a celebration of satisfaction. It even specifies a timetable for sexual union.
We are very lucky that Judaism is sex positive, as we would say now. And I thought that was one of the very beautiful parts of your book, is about, how your mother changed after your father died, that they had this very passionate love affair, and you were very worried about her sort of falling apart afterwards. And then you say that this was actually when she really came into her own. And that's, there's something very hopeful about that even the period of your life that you think might be the hardest period can actually be a time of great discovery and renewal.
It can be. And again, it's my theory about death. I think that losing daddy was like, for my mother, losing a limb, let us say, but she got it. She knew that she was going to claim her life now or never. And I have to say, in quiet admission, I've always sung nicely, but since my mother is dead, I sing beautifully, because she came to me when I was 16 and said, "Don't you have to be born with a voice?" And I don't think she meant any harm. I let that harm me for decades, even while I was starring in musicals and got the nomination for Best Actress in a Musical. I never believed in myself as a singer. I just allowed her comment. I chose for her comment to slip me in half in the area of singing in my profession. And that was my choice. That's your choice. So when the hummus goes all over the floor, it's your choice. And when even the mother, when you're of an adult, says something, it's your choice. So you can choose to forgive it. The most amazing thing about my mother is we were two different trees on two different lawns. And as she became a widow, our branches bowered. She began to say she loved me. She did say she loved me. She wasn't sentimental, but she had some more sentiment. And I began to understand what it meant for a person to come in every Wednesday at 99 and 100 years old, with Joyce driving for her to have dinner with me at Yamura, the Japanese restaurant right near the Music Box Theater. It was a big deal to get dressed. She once came to me at 100 and said, "I want to die. Whatever took me 10 minutes takes me 2 hours. I'm ready to die." I said, "Mom, you can't die." "What do you mean?" I said, "You have a luncheon at the Metropolitan Club, you have a wedding at the Plaza, and we have a meeting at the Harvard Club." She said, "Wait a minute, let me get my book." So that's the other advice. You got aging parents, give them things to look forward to, and give yourself things to look forward to. That's one of the greatest things about starring as Dr. Ruth Westheimer, opening this Bay Street Theater for the first time in 15 months with Scott Schwartz, who directed me in Golda's Balcony. It's thrilling. It's thrilling. It's my tikkun. This is my tikkun. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was gender equality. Dr. Ruth Westheimer was sexual therapy, because it brought back the intimacy in the family that was ripped from her in her youth when she was 10 and a half years old, and unexpectedly so.
Well, we wish you the best of luck in this performance, and I hope everyone will go out and buy your book and read it. It is really so delightful. And we just want to thank you so much, Tovah, for being with us tonight, for sharing your story and the story of your mother and your wisdom and your mother's wisdom and the rest of your family with us. We appreciate how you brought to light the strong and often complex lineage of Jewish women that so many of us are carrying on, and may it continue.
I thank you so much. And those of you who are slow readers, you can get the audiobook. The audiobook is amusing, and Sony's given me permission to sing on it. So it's my pleasure, and I hope it helps your day. I hope Lilyville helps your insights with your own parent, not just your mommy, but your mother, your father, all of us who are children of other people who tried their best by us.
Absolutely. For the rest of you, thank you for being here, for asking wonderful questions. Our next Quarantine Book Talk series begins in mid-July, so keep keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, we have plenty of programming to keep you stimulated and nourished. Next Thursday, we begin a 4-session online history course on the theme of forgotten lives in partnership with Central Synagogue, and I very much hope you'll join us for that. You can find the link to register at jwa.org/events. We will also be having a special Global Day of Learning on June 27th to 28th to celebrate the launch of our revised and updated Encyclopedia of Jewish Women. And I hope you'll consider joining us for some of those sessions on a very wide range of topics, including cartoonists and Mizrahi feminism and Jewish Cuban women and queer poetry and more. You can also find that information at jwa.org/events, and I hope to see some of you there. Thank you again for joining us tonight. It was wonderful to be with all of you. Until next time, be well, take good care, be safe. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Tovah. This was really a joy.
Pleasure for me, Judith.
Thank you. Good luck. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.